Hi, welcome to this lecture titled Turning a New Page in the Digital Age, Leveraging Copy and Paste Literacies. What is copy and paste literacy? It is a new literacy that could emerge through copying digital content and pasting it into other contexts. It has become more prevalent due to the deepening penetration of the internet and analogous tech, like things that share content digitally. The focus of this presentation is to leverage student copy-paste practices to help them develop broader literacy skills. It's a little bit of context. The new literacies framework. You can examine this phenomenon of copy-paste literacies from a new literacies framework. For those of you who might not know, new literacies are those forms of literacy that have been enabled through the development of digital technologies, although this is not an absolutely necessary condition. Technology has a strangely paradoxical impact on literacy. I think some people think it's unreservedly good, but that's not necessarily the case. The Gutenberg press opened the potential for a future development called mechanical reproduction, for those of you who know Walter Benjamin. This press allowed the mass and cheap production of text. And as reproduction costs decreased and distribution channels became more fluid, literacy flourished, especially in the developed world. So that opened up literacy. Benjamin's ideas concerning mechanical reproduction grew exponentially in terms of two ways: reproduction and sharing. The first, for reproduction, internet connectivity allows instantaneous content reproduction. Obviously, if you use the internet, you see how easy it can be to reproduce things like retweeting content. It also allows sharing. You can quickly share content globally through various social media channels, and if you know the right people and are an influencer, they can go globally quite quickly. Before the internet, there were communications constraints, such as geography and time, which limited the extent of how we could communicate. And these have been radically conflated. Basically, geography and time have collapsed, and you can send things across the world instantaneously. From this, the digital reproduction of content, it caused a counter argument in some literacy circles to emerge. And it is basically this: is the ability to mass produce content at such an incredibly low entry point, condemning digital natives to a life of lower literacy levels than their analog forebears? So the affordances, conflating geography and time, easy mass reproduction, easy copying, again, maybe this lowers literacy levels. So there's been, over time, and I'll be examining some people from new literacies and just literacies generally, on their thoughts on the tradition and the shift from the traditional to digital literacy. New literacies is a relatively recent movement. In terms of Buckingham, who was discussed a little bit earlier, he advocates for research that examines the affordances and complications engendered by media texts. So there's many really good things and many difficult complications. Sonia Livingston, she argues for the need to be able to read audiovisual material. And she dated this need as starting from as far back as the mid-20th century and traces its impact to the present. So as various types of audiovisual material have surfaced, the need to read them, that it becomes more complicated than it might necessarily seem. She further talks about the idea that this acknowledges policymakers who create regulatory frameworks that produce an ICT literate population. This gives an institutional endorsement on the importance of widespread non-traditional literacies. So regulation and regulatory frameworks play key in this, and the spread of audiovisual material and how it's conceived and how it helps or hinders literacy. Renee Hobbs, she talks about these developments cause attention in educational rank and file, like teachers and principals and regular professors. And this gives a conflicting view educators have on mass media and its role in formal educational environments. Some are very pro mass media, others are quite against it. There's a different context for copy-paste practices, and copy-paste practices are perceived as a dichotomy depending on the context, and these can either be positive or negative. In terms of the personal and social context, copy-paste and remixing content can be seen very positively. For example, youth can digitize and share video content on YouTube, and it's quite common for those of you who know any youth at all, and a lot of adults. In terms of negatives, these different contexts, they can make the appropriate traits of copy paste seem negative. For example, if you, instead of looking at personal social context of youth, if you look at it from an academic, legal, or copyright perspective, in terms of academics, copying and pasting digital text is often deemed plagiarism, and legally, if you do that with accreditation, it can be copyright infringement. So there's definitely some negatives to this copying and pasting. I'm going to talk a little bit about Jenkins and Diserto, about the idea of poaching anyone, moral arguments for appropriation. Henry Jenkins examines the appropriating text and fan writing for the Star Trek show by referencing Diserto. Diserto, he characterizes Star Trek fan writing as poaching. Quote, far from being writers, readers are travelers. They move across lands belonging to someone else, like nomads poaching their way across lands belonging to someone else, like nomads poaching their way across fields they did not write, despoiling the wealth of Egypt to enjoy themselves. It's a great quote. Further, Jenkins concludes, and it's about how topsy-turvy this has become. Quote, consumption becomes production, reading becomes writing, spectator culture becomes participatory culture, and I think this sort of shows a change in the way that we conceive of literacy. Together from Diserto and Jenkins, the seemingly artificial distinctions between normally dialectical practices such as consumption production, reading writing, spectator participant, are reduced when fans become involved in producing transformative work like fan fiction. So when they see a show like Star Trek and make fan fiction, it kind of, again, it changes these dialectical processes and practices. And as a result, copy-paste becomes more morally ambiguous than what it might initially seem. 21st century approach to appropriation. Copy-paste and computer coding, it was created in social networks. Dan Perkel attempts to make sense of and may justify common practice for digital natives, that is performing various variations of copy-pasting digital content within the context of social networks. Further, Perkel focuses on MySpace, so I'm sure hopefully some of you remember that, sort of a predecessor to Facebook. Their members reuse popular images by copying and pasting an HTML link to any image on the web. The members of the site, they embed video, audio, and even games in their profiles, which again seems very similar to today. In terms of companies, they encourage you to copy-paste links, media, etc. across the internet, especially ones like platforms that don't really care about copyright laws as much as the providers of that content. In terms of this breadth, this copy-paste practices, this is really important, obviously. It is not just confined to MySpace. If you look at social networks like Facebook, etc., or software like Microsoft Word, they leverage user copy-paste practices, the idea of copying something and then pasting it in somewhere else. In terms of the positives for literacy, copy-paste practices provide skills in personal, social, and academic environments. In terms of computational thinking skills, you can engage in visual programming languages like MIT's Scratch. I'm sure some of you have used it or heard of it. Programming computers by forking, like examples of GitHub or code cloning to master programming. So those are very common to copy-paste code. Remixing digital media, where you can take various media from different sources and then mix them together. Creating multimedia wikis or blogs, and collaborating across online learning spaces where different content is shared. These are among a number of ever-emerging possibilities. In terms of a conclusion to this, our perpetual online connectivity that's been going on for quite a while will only continue and become more ubiquitous. This will drive copy and paste practices using web content among youth. There's almost no way that's going to reverse. So as a result, we know that we're going to be online more and more, and that will cause more copying and pasting. As a result, we educators must figure out ways to introduce extracurricular learning materials to students to learn to vet material for its informational quality. If they're going to be copying and pasting stuff, and it's informational, text, images, videos, we should help them learn about the quality of this information to make sure that they're passing on and using high quality information. Finally, copy and paste practices may be a useful way to begin having these vital discussions. So hopefully this whole idea of this presentation has been a sort of a beginning for you. This lecture has been titled Turning a New Page in the Digital Age, Leveraging Copy and Paste Literacies. Thanks for watching. Take care.